The rule of law, as we understand the principles here in the United States, equal justice under the law, due process, presumption of innocence. Well, these principles have certainly been turned on their head these past few years. So what can we the people do to make this, set things right? Article 6 of the Constitution requires all government officials, federal, state, local, executive, legislative, judicial branch, to take an oath to support the Constitution, supreme law of the land. So how can we make these government officials more accountable to their obligation to that oath? At the federal level, it's going to require constitutional initiatives, which I've written about, I support, I'm running on, for the judicial branch, the judges, Supreme Court justices in the federal judicial branch, constitutional initiatives that will have consequences should they step outside of their legitimate authority. The doctrine of original jurisdiction or the doctrine of judicial review. 1803, Marbury versus Madison. When they step outside of those boundaries, then a constitutional initiative to hold them to account, get them off the bench. These activist judges that legislate from the bench, the cute crap they're pulling these days, which amounts to a delay of game. The lower court judges that make absurd rulings, in regard to what the Trump administration is doing, knowing they're going to be overturned either at the appellate level or the Supreme Court level, but it delays the implementation of the policy that Trump wants to do. The Supreme Court, the most recent one being the census question, the citizenship thing. In 2009, an administration arbitrarily took the question off after it had been there for a century, the citizenship question. All right, Trump wanted to put it back on. The Administrative Procedures Act that governs how these folks, take care of things like the census. Both the majority opinion and the dissenting opinion said that the Trump administration complied wholly with that act. In fact, the act specifically bars judicial review of agency discretion. Alito wrote about it in his dissenting opinion. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially saying, well, that's why we have elections, and elections have consequences. So, a constitutional amendment to ensure the rule of law is first and foremost, particularly in the judges' rulings. For Congress, how do you loosen their vice grip hold on power? Constitutional initiatives, term limits. I've included one that I have not read about. It's the senatorial recall initiative that I wrote about. You can see it in the contract with America 2020 that I wrote. But to ensure that the legislative branch's vice grip hold on power, that grip is loosened somewhat so that the equal branches, the checks and balances thing is being fulfilled at the federal level. And constitutional amendments there to get fidelity to the law back in the forefront. At the state and local level, it's going to be much easier. Legislative initiatives, I've suggested civil rights initiatives. Let's take a look at the Civil Rights Act, civil liberties protections. Because someone's elected mayor, or a municipal court judge gets elected, or a state court judge or a governor, that does not make them above the law. That does not give them liberty to ignore the law. If they disagree with the law, there's a process, a legal process through the legislative actions to amend the law, to change the law. But you can't just ignore it. How long does it take? And this is what's so dangerous about what's going on now. If our elected officials have so little regard for the rule of law, how long does that take before the rest of us start saying, I don't like that law, so I'm just going to ignore it? That breakdown is dangerous. It's playing with fire. Dangerous territory. So at the state and local level, that can be federal legislation, civil rights. There's, the Trump administration's policy, the tack they're taking with addressing this by withholding grant money. I don't agree with that. You withhold federal grants that are intended to augment the resources of law enforcement when it's lawlessness is what the problem is, these sanctuary cities and states. I'm advocating something a little bit more deliberate, to go directly after the individuals that are lawless, whether it's a mayor, a municipal court judge, a governor. Let's go after the individuals that are lawless and do it directly. In Massachusetts, back in June, these are a couple stories from June. A Massachusetts state judge was indicted by a U.S. attorney for conspiracy to obstruct justice, obstruction of justice, aiding and abetting a criminal, and perjury. This judge let an illegal alien out the back door of a courthouse to evade ICE. And they indicted her and arrested her. That's the kind of action that I support. Same month up in Oregon, Sanctuary City protected an illegal alien rapist. Released him back into the community where he raped a disabled woman in a wheelchair again in front of her 3-year-old son. I would throw whatever mayor, sheriff, whoever was responsible for that in Oregon, I'd throw that person in jail, charge them with the same crimes as the judge in Massachusetts was charged, plus accessory to rape, and put that person, that public official, in prison. And that rapist is still at large. I've not seen any stories where the person's been caught yet. So what can we do about the rule of your law? Challenge your candidates. Are there candidates that understand the significance of public officials at all levels of government, all three branches? Nobody, we hear nobody's above the law, unless of course you're a Clinton or an illegal alien. They're above the law apparently. But that's dangerous ground, this disregard for the rule of law by our public officials. That is bad news. That is bad news. That's playing with fire. Now we can fix that. That's what I'm running on, rule of law, and how I intend to address those issues head on, through constitutional initiatives and legislative initiatives to make those people charged with upholding the law responsible for their actions.